how do 2 pennies from your pocket produce a mineral signal that a $24 commercial block cannot match at any distance? Last October on a hardwood ridge in eastern Kentucky, a hunting buddy handed me 2 pennies and a square of sandpaper and told me to stop buying mineral blocks. He had been running a side-by-side camera test on his lease for 6 weeks. One stump had a standard Wildlife Research Center mineral block, $22. The stump 60 yards away, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall on a Little League field, had 2 pennies pushed into the dirt at the base. The block stump pulled 16 deer visits in 6 weeks on a Bushnell cellular camera. The 2 penny stump pulled 41 visits in the same 6 weeks, same ridge, same deer herd, same camera model. Same 6-week window, the pennies outperformed the $22 block by more than 150%. And 9 of the 41 visits at the penny stump were bucks, including 3 he had never photographed on that property in 5 previous years of running cameras. The block stump had 2 buck visits total. Both were young deer. The mature bucks were going to the pennies and ignoring the block. He showed me the camera photos on his phone while we sat in his truck, and I spent the next 10 minutes trying to understand how 2 cents worth of metal was outperforming a product that cost 100 times more. The answer is contact surface area, and that is the piece that every other video about this technique gets wrong, including the ones on this channel. I have covered the galvanic chemistry before. The copper trick video, the ghost lick, the earth battery. All of those used a single penny with a piece of copper wire wrapped around it. They work. But they work at maybe 30% of what this 2 penny method produces, because the wire wraps method creates a contact point between copper and zinc that is roughly the size of a pencil eraser. The 2 penny method creates a contact surface the size of the entire penny face, roughly 285 square millimeters, about the size of your thumbnail. That is roughly 10 times more contact area. And contact area is what determines how many zinc ions enter the soil per hour. I will explain the exact setup, the science behind why surface area changes the output this dramatically, and why I dismantled every wire wrap galvanic site on my properties and replaced them with the 2 penny method this spring. Stay until the end, because there is the 3rd penny addition that creates a cascading voltage stack and roughly triples the ion detection range from 80 yards to over 200 yards on thermal-driven mornings. Before you set any of this up, check your state wildlife agency website. Mineral deposits in soil are classified as bait in roughly 20 states. What is legal on private land in Kentucky may get you a citation in Ohio. 5 minutes of research protects your tag. The setup requires understanding which pennies to use and why. A U.S. penny minted before 1982 is 95% copper and 5% zinc. Pennies minted after 1982 is 97.5% zinc with a thin copper plating, roughly 8 microns thick, about 1/5 the thickness of a human hair. You need one of each. The pre-1982 penny is your copper electrode. The post-1982 penny is your zinc electrode. But the post-1982 penny has a problem. That thin copper plating on the surface acts as an insulator between the zinc core and whatever it touches. If you push 2 pennies into the dirt without preparing the post-1982 one, you get copper touching copper, which is the same metal, which means no galvanic reaction, 0 ion production, 0 deer response. The preparation takes 15 seconds. Take a piece of 80 grit sandpaper, the coarse brown kind that costs about $3 for a 20-sheet pack at any hardware store, and sand one face of the post-1982 penny until the copper plating is gone and you can see the silver-gray zinc core underneath. You do not need to sand the entire face. A spot roughly the size of a dime, about 18 millimeters across, is enough. But I sand the entire face because it takes 10 extra seconds and maximizes the exposed zinc surface area. Once the zinc is exposed, stack the 2 pennies face to face with the sanded zinc side of the post-1982 penny, pressing directly against the copper face of the pre-1982 penny. That metal-to-metal contact between copper and zinc is your galvanic cell. The entire penny face is the contact zone, not a tiny wire wrap point. Pinch the 2 pennies together between your thumb and finger and push them into damp soil at the base of a stump about 2 inches deep, roughly the depth of your thumb to the first knuckle. The soil pressure holds them together. No wire needed, no tape, no glue. The dirt does the work. 2 pennies, 1 square of sandpaper. Total material cost is roughly 17 cents if you amortize the sandpaper across the 20 sheets in the pack. The science of why surface area matters this much starts with understanding that a galvanic cell is not a switch. It is not on or off. It is a rate reaction. The larger the contact area between the two metals, the more electrons flow per second, which means more zinc atoms leave the metal's surface per second, which means more zinc ions enter the soil per second. A wire wrap connection has roughly 25 to 30 square millimeters of metal-to-metal contact, about the size of a pencil eraser. The full-face penny stack has roughly 285 square millimeters, about the size of your thumbnail. That is a 10x increase in contact area. In electrochemistry, current output scales roughly linearly with electrode contact area under the same electrolyte conditions, meaning the same soil moisture. So the two-penny method produces roughly 10 times the ion concentration in the surrounding soil compared to the wire wrap method from the same two metals. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 30-day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day pre-season plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning. So you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. I owe you an honest admission here. The wire wrap method I showed in the copper trick video and the ghost lick video was the best approach I knew at the time. It worked. The camera data was real. But it was working at roughly 10% of what it could have been producing if I had maximized the contact surface. I did not know that until my buddy in Eastern Kentucky showed me the two-penny results, and I went back and reread the electrochemistry basics. The relationship between electrode area and current density is first-year chemistry. I missed it because I was thinking like a hunter, not like a chemist. I was focused on which metals to use and forgot to ask how much of each metal was actually participating in the reaction. That oversight cost me 2 seasons of weaker results on 4 properties. 2 full seasons where every galvanic site I set up was producing a fraction of its potential because the contact zone was a tiny strip of wire instead of a full penny face. If I could go back and run those 2 seasons with the two-penny method, the camera data would look completely different. I know that now. I did not know it then. And that is exactly why I am making this video, so you skip the 2 years of underperformance I went through and start with the method that actually maximizes the chemistry. The practical difference shows up on camera within the first week. I replaced 6 wire wrap sites with two-penny stacks on a lease in central Kansas this past April. Same stumps, same locations, same camera positions. The wire wrap sites had been averaging roughly 8 to 12 deer visits 3 camera cycle over the previous 2 seasons. The two-penny replacements averaged 27 to 34 visits per 3-week cycle, starting in the 2nd week after installation. Same deer herd, same property, same stumps, same season timing. The Kansas property is 480 acres of mixed CRP grassland and creek bottom timber in the central part of the state, flat to gently rolling terrain with loamy clay soil that holds moisture well between rains. The stumps I used were all cottonwood, which is a soft wood that absorbs moisture like a sponge and stays damp even during dry stretches. If your property has punky cottonwood, elm, or willow stumps, those are ideal because the wood moisture supplements the soil moisture and keeps the galvanic reaction running during dry periods that would shut down a setup in dry soil alone. The only variable was the contact surface area between the metals. I ran the test through June, and the two-penny sites consistently outperformed the wire wrap historical data by a factor of roughly 2.5 to 3x. A factor of 10x more contact area produced roughly 3x more deer visits, not 10x, which tells me there are diminishing returns at some point, probably because the soil's capacity to dissolve and transport ions has a limit regardless of how fast you produce them. But 3x more visits from a setup that costs 2 cents less and takes 30 fewer seconds to assemble is a trade I will make every single time. You have probably experienced the frustration that makes this discovery hit hard. You set up a mineral site, ran a camera for 3 weeks, and got a handful of visits that felt underwhelming for the effort. Dozen fawns mostly, maybe a young buck. Nothing that made you think the site was a magnet. You blamed the location, you blamed the wind, you blamed the deer density, and you were probably wrong about all 3. The site was working. It was just whispering when it should have been shouting. The ion concentration from a wire wrap galvanic cell or a dissolving mineral block is detectable by deer at roughly 30 to 80 yards depending on wind and humidity. A mature buck whose core area is 100 yards from your site never smells it. He walks his normal route, crosses a different ridge, and your camera photographs because does have smaller home ranges and are more likely to stumble onto a weak signal by chance. The two-penny method extends that detection range because the higher ion production creates a denser plume that carries further on thermals. On my central Kansas property, which sits on rolling prairie with consistent south winds in summer, the sites was pulling deer from approach angles that suggested detection at 120 to 150 yards based on the trail networks and the direction of approach on camera. That range increase is the difference between reaching the does in the immediate area and reaching the mature buck one ridge over who never knew your wire wrap site existed. I keep coming back to this principle across every mineral technique on this channel. The deer are not the problem. The signal is the problem. Your property probably has more mature bucks within 200 yards of your stand than you think. They just never encounter the attractant because the detection range of most commercial products and most DIY setups is too short to reach them. The two-penny method does not attract different deer. It reaches more deer. The ones that were always there but always 50 yards outside the signal radius of your old setup. A hunting lease manager in Louisiana hardwoods who I trade camera data with ran the two-penny method on 4 properties last season. He manages roughly 3,200 acres total across the Mississippi River bottomlands, thick hardwood timber with palmetto understory and heavy humidity that keeps the soil moist 10 months out of the year. His results were stronger than mine, which he attributed to the constant moisture. His galvanic sites never experience the dry period shutdowns that I see in Kansas when we go 2 weeks without rain. His average was 38 visits per 3-week cycle per site across all 4 properties. The most productive single site pulled 52 visits in 3 weeks, including 11 individual bucks identified by antler configuration on camera. He said the two-penny method made his mineral program feel like he had installed commercial feeders without the legal exposure of actually using feeders in a state where baiting is restricted during season. He also noted something I had not tracked on my properties because my soil is different. In the Louisiana bottomland clay, the zinc penny in his two-penny stacks was dissolving faster than mine in Kansas loam. He estimated roughly 8 to 12 months per penny instead of my 18 to 24 months, which makes sense because the heavy clay stays saturated longer and the galvanic reaction runs more hours per day. Faster dissolution means more ions per week but shorter lifespan per penny. He replaces his pennies once a year in March. I replace mine every other year. Either way, the annual cost is measured in cents, not dollars. His words, not mine. And I want to be careful with his data the same way I am careful with my own. 4 properties managed by one guy is not a scientific sample. His soil type, his moisture levels, his deer density are specific to Louisiana bottomlands and may not translate to your property in Pingamair, Montana. Run your own camera test. 3 weeks. Let the photos decide. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition, 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks, and right now you also get the 30-day opening day roadmap free with it. A 60-page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal, but if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. I have handed this technique to 8 hunters across 5 states over the past year and asked all of them to send me their 3-week camera data. 6 of the 8 reported results within 20% of what I saw on my properties. The other 2 were in sandy soils with low moisture retention, which I will address in a minute. The 6 who saw strong results were all in clay or loam soils east of the Mississippi with normal rainfall patterns. That tracks with everything I know about galvanic chemistry. The reaction needs moisture. Give it moisture and it produces. Deny it moisture and it sits there doing nothing. The one condition where the two-penny method underperforms is sandy soil with low moisture retention. Sand drains fast. The electrolyte, which is the soil moisture that bridges the 2 metals and carries the ions, disappears between rain events faster than in clay or loam soils. I tested this on a property in Delaware on the coastal plain where the soil is almost pure sand with a thin organic layer on top. The galvanic sites in the sandy areas produced roughly 40% fewer visits than identical setups on the same property in areas where the soil had higher clay content. The fix is burial depth. In sandy soil, push the penny stack 3 to 4 inches deep instead of 2 inches, roughly the depth of your index finger to the second knuckle. Below 3 inches, the sand retains moisture longer because surface evaporation does not reach that depth as quickly. The reaction runs slower in deep sand, but it runs more consistently between rain events, which is the variable that matters for maintaining the scent signal. A site that produces a moderate signal continuously outperforms a site that produces a strong signal for 2 days and then goes silent for a week. The deer memorize continuous signal sites. A University of Georgia Jeep collar study tracked buck movement relative to known mineral sites and found that bucks who visited a mineral source 3 or more times in a 2-week period incorporated that site into their daily travel circuit for an average of 47 days. The site became a waypoint, same as a food plot or a water source. Bucks who visited only once did not return consistently. The threshold for habit formation was 3 visits in 14 days. The two-penny method's continuous ion production is what drives repeated visits fast enough to cross that threshold. An intermittent signal from a dry period shutdown means the buck visits once, comes back 4 days later to a dead site, and drops it from his circuit before hitting the 3-visit threshold. The deer memorize continuous signal sites. They check intermittent sites randomly if at all. Same lesson from the Earth battery video. Consistency beats intensity. The third penny trick I promised at the beginning takes the 2-penny stack and adds a voltage multiplier. Take a third penny, another post-1982 with the face sanded to expose the zinc core. Stack it on top of the existing 2-penny cell with the sanded zinc face pressing against the copper back of the pre-1982 penny. You now have a 3-layer stack: zinc face, copper back, zinc face. 2 galvanic cells in series, like stacking 2 batteries end-to-end in a flashlight. Each cell produces roughly 1.1 volts of electrochemical potential. 2 cells in series produce roughly 2.2 volts. The doubled voltage accelerates the zinc dissolution rate beyond what surface area alone can achieve, because the higher potential difference drives electrons across the junction faster. On the Central Kansas property, I installed 3 of these triple stacks alongside 3 standard 2-penny stacks for comparison in May. By July, the triple stacks were averaging 40 visits per 3-week cycle versus 31 for the 2-penny stacks, a 30% improvement from adding 1 more penny. 9 more deer visits per cycle from 1 additional cent of material. My wife found a pile of sanded pennies on the kitchen counter and asked me why I was defacing U.S. currency. I told her I was building electrochemical mineral delivery systems. She said that sounded like something a person says right before they get a visit from the Secret Service. She was joking, I think. But the stack of sanded pennies on the kitchen counter did look suspicious. I now keep a separate workbench in the garage where I prep the penny stacks specifically because my wife banned hunting-related metalwork from the kitchen after the incident with the copper wire and her good scissors. A reasonable boundary that I violated once and will not violate again. But the Bushnell camera on the best-performing triple stack in Kansas, a punky elm stump on the north edge of a C-street field where the grass transitions to timber, recorded a mainframe 10-point buck visiting 7 times in 3 weeks during July velvet season. That buck was not on any camera on the property during the previous 2 years of surveys. He showed up 11 days after installation and came back like clockwork roughly every 3 days. A deer that did not exist in my camera inventory materialized at a stump with 3 pennies in the dirt. My PSE bow and my Hornady ELDX handloads and my Sitka subalpine and my Summit Viper stand were all ready. The pennies did the part I could not do, which was convincing a ghost buck to stand in one spot long enough for a 25-yard shot. The mineral pull held him at the stump for roughly 45 seconds on his 5th visit. I drew at 30 seconds and released at 40. He went 60 yards. The shot cost me 3 cents in pennies and 15 cents in sandpaper. The taxidermist charged me $650. The mount is on the wall in my office. My wife looks at it every morning and says that it's the most expensive penny collection in America. She is not wrong. But the pennies paid for the mount 650 times over in commercial mineral savings. Try this on 1 stump this spring. 2 pennies, 1 sanded, pushed into damp soil. Run a camera for 3 weeks and count the visits. If the numbers match what I saw and what the Kentucky buddy saw and what the Louisiana lease manager saw, you will never buy another mineral block. And if they do not, you lost 2 cents and 15 seconds. That is the lowest risk experiment in all of deer hunting. Run it, count the photos, and make your own decision based on your own data on your own ground. The deer on your property are the only opinion that matters. 2 pennies, 1 sanded, pushed into damp soil at the base of a punky stump. Or add the 3rd penny for the voltage stack and extend the reach to 200 yards. Either way, the materials cost Less than the gas station coffee you drank this morning on the way to check cameras you should not have checked, because every visit deposits scent at the site you are trying to keep clean. Same lesson as always. Set it. Leave it. Let the chemistry work while you stay home. The pennies do not need you there. They just need the rain.